Welcome, everyone, to the Change Starts Here podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Odham. And this week is our solo episode. It will be a short episode, and it's a follow-up of our February conversation about the power of silence. I was blown away by the number of folks who reached out to me to tell me what impact such a short episode had on them. And so if you haven't listened to it, please go back and listen to it, because I take no credit for it. A good friend and mentor of mine just shared some really powerful thoughts to me about getting comfortable going to the wilderness and start seeking out silence and isolation to gain strength. So I'm going to share a few words real quickly for those of you who didn't hear it or don't have time to go back and listen to the other one. And then I'm going to dive into what we're talking about today about getting uncomfortable. So whether you are a millennial or not, we are living in a cultural moment where many of us have been conditioned towards burnout. And our tendency in that place is to turn to comfort, distraction, and busyness to feed the cravings of our hearts and the longings of our soul. We hope Netflix, the second glass of wine, a great dessert, which I love, those, video games, just a little bit more sleep if I hit the snooze button, will all fix us, only to find that we are still waking up the next day into our same disposition in reality. My friend asked me at that point as he was talking, he's like, as you come here today, like, how are you doing? And so check with yourself. How are you doing? None of those things are bad. No, I'm not trying. I love Netflix. I mean, my wife and I have different shows that we watch together. We like to drink wine together. I love desserts. Video games with my kids are super fun. And, who doesn't like to hit this snooze button from time to time? But the reality is it's those things aren't bad. They only become bad when we are using them in a way of avoidance or for extra comfort. So he continues to go on to say, there's a pattern correlation all throughout history of great leaders experiencing a time in wilderness or quiet place. It is in that time that they've developed their strength and vision. The wilderness is critical for many of these leaders, but the problem is that many of us, it is a place we try to avoid the most in our lives. Either we try to avoid it because of the discomfort we might face in it, or we avoid it because we have conditioned our lives in a way where we don't even know how to get to it. That could be about, for me, I think I told you guys this last time, but for me, it was always about, I get in the car and I never have silence. I have sports talk radio. I have music. I pick up the phone, which are all good things. But if I've not had some sort of silence to sit with my own thoughts, it becomes avoidance over time. Most of us hate silence, isolation, and discomfort. And many of us will do anything to avoid it. But it's within silence. It's within the loneliness where nourishment, refreshment, and growth can take place. At the end of the February podcast, I left you with the question. The question for you is, do you have the awareness to enter into the wilderness? And do you have the courage to stay there? And as I've said to you all many times, this podcast, which I hope is so beneficial to each one of you, is also something that's very personal for a growth moment for my own life. I look at it as my own mirror. And so I have spent a lot of time diving into silence, at least more time than I've ever spent, and trying to figure out where are places that I go to for comfort. And for me, there's lots of places, but the one that is most obvious, if I take the kind of atomic habits framework and think about what's that first step I can take, for me, food is my comfort. It has been my comfort. I travel a lot. When I don't travel, I'm here, at the house, and I can run up into the kitchen and grab whatever I want. And some of you know that I have this autoimmune disease that has me take some crazy medication and go to the hospital once a month for certain shots. And so for the longest time, I'm on copious amounts of prednisone, which is no fun if you've had it. And for the longest time, I've just written off of like my weight gain and puffiness and lethargy and stuff that happens from time to time as an excuse to what I'm going through. Well, making time to get uncomfortable and be in the wilderness and sit in silence and stay there, because it is really uncomfortable, led me towards the end of February to think about fasting. And I know fasting is kind of a trend. Honestly, anything that gets too popular too quickly, my somewhat cynical self usually just holds back on it because it gets too popular. I know it's really weird. I'm sorry. But fasting for fasting's sake, or fasting just for weight loss, was never appealed to me, because I just thought, I like food. And so one thing that was on my heart heading into March was, I'm going to fast, sometimes between 16 hours a day. I think right now I've gotten to 24. I'm trying to get to 36 or 72, which sounds crazy even still to me right now. I'm going to fast because food is where I go to for comfort. So during my fast, when I have real hunger pains, or when I have the urge, whether I'm happy, sad, scared, whatever, I take time to sit in silence again, to hit the pause and say, all right, I'm super uncomfortable. I know I have planned not to eat till 4 o'clock today or 6 o'clock today or whatever it is. And I'm just going to sit there and work on my breathing, really check in with myself and how I'm feeling and what I'm avoiding, and then look for solutions to those real problems. And what's funny is that, I would love to lose weight. I wasn't necessarily trying to lose weight. I've lost, 10 pounds or so just through that, which is crazy. But the reality is I feel so much more focused, so much more intentional. And I don't know how to explain the real feeling, but the ownership that food has over me is not completely gone, because obviously if I see an amazing cookie, I've got to get it. Whole Foods brown butter chocolate chip cookies ran into the other day are amazing, but I don't crave them all now, and I have the proper perspective on it. And again, I'm only 2 months in, so I'm not trying to say this is some massive life-changing victory, but the challenge I gave myself and each of us, and my friend gave me, honestly, was, do we have the awareness to enter into the wilderness, into the silence, into the isolation? And do we have the courage to stay there? Once I had the awareness, I then had to challenge myself with the courage to stay there. For me, it's fasting. And so I'm working on my food addiction first, or whatever that looks like. And maybe a strong term, but whatever that is for my comfort. And then I'm going to step back and think, how does that look in Netflix? How does that look in, I love podcasts, but like there are some podcasts that I don't necessarily know are, if I'm listening to grow, or if I'm just escape. Again, some escape, probably not everyone's going to agree with this, but I do think it is healthy to have a show or a movie or a podcast that you can just check out, and it almost becomes like a pretend world. I'm okay with that, but it's when you live in that space that I think is a problem for us, and it starts limiting our ability to impact and be present on the call and mission that we have for our lives. And so my challenge for each of you is to join me in getting uncomfortable. I hate it. I love food. I want to eat it all the time. I know this is absurd. It's not supposed to be a food podcast, but I love now getting uncomfortable more, because the more uncomfortable I'm getting, the more clarity I'm getting on my mission, purpose, on my relationships, in such a fun, cool way that I did not expect. And so I'm going to keep trying to get uncomfortable. And I just want you to consider what that looks like in your life. As always, I hope this was helpful to you. If there's someone in your life that you think it could be helpful for, please share with them. And if you subscribe, thank you for subscribing. If you haven't, please hit the subscribe button. We just feel very, very fortunate that we continue to grow at the rate we're growing. So we'll talk next week. Thanks for listening. Please support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, podcast on Apple or Spotify, and help us celebrate the beautiful, messy work of shaping human potential.